What's up, everybody? This is Craig, and this is day 29 of the 30-day video challenge. In this video, we're going to talk about how to be consistent as a creator. We'll talk about three things. One, what is consistency? Two, consistency with a purpose. And three, we'll talk about the steps needed to be consistent with a purpose. Let's dive in to look at some definitions to try to get a foundational knowledge of what consistency means. I try to pick three different sources to give us kind of a well-rounded definition of what consistency means. And by no means is this a full-on, very detailed view of consistency. I'm looking at this from the point of view of a creator. So, as we look at what Merriam-Webster says about consistency, there's several definitions, and one of these definitions goes something like this. It says, agreement or harmony of parts or features to one another or a whole. The example sentence they give is this: the furnishings and decorations in all the rooms reflect a consistency of style. That is one definition they give. Then another definition they also give is harmony of conduct or practice with profession. And the example sentence here is followed her own advice with consistency. And now we're moving on to Cambridge Dictionary. This is looking at consistency with the idea of being the same. And one of the definitions they provide says the quality of always behaving or performing in a similar way or of always happening in a similar way. Dictionary.com provides several definitions for consistency. I'm focusing on three of them. Number one is a degree of density, firmness, viscosity, etc. The example sentence is, the liquid has the consistency of cream. Definition number two that I wrote down was steadfast adherence to the same principles, course, form, etc. And the example sentence is, there is consistency in his pattern of behavior. The last one that I wrote down was the condition of cohering or holding together and retaining form, solidity or firmness. So why do we go here with the definitions first? We all have our own view of what a certain word or phrase means in our own head, but I think it's important that we kind of visit a similar definition. And so using these sources helps bring us back to a common definition. The definition that I really agree with and that really helps frame this discussion is the one by Cambridge Dictionary, which is the quality of always behaving or performing in a similar way, or of always happening in a similar way. I believe this definition in particular applies to creating content and being a creator. Our desire to be consistent as a creator typically means in the content that we're posting, that we're putting out there. This could be that we're publishing books every year. This could be that we're publishing music on a regular schedule. This could be that we're publishing poetry on a regular schedule. Whatever it is, we are looking at consistency as in how we're putting out our work. So, unlike a lot of videos that you're going to find on YouTube when it comes to the phrase consistency, I'm not looking at consistency for consistency's sake. I'm looking at consistency with a purpose. I'm not interested in just being consistent. I'm interested in being consistent for a reason. I want to be consistent with my publishing for not only my audience, but also for myself. Being consistent in the work that I'm putting out there not only benefits my audience, but also benefits me. So if we're looking at being consistent with a purpose, we're not just simply trying to post every Tuesday or every Friday or put a podcast out on Sunday. We are trying to work towards a goal that we have. Maybe that goal is that we believe that a podcast is going to be the best method to reach our audience. And our goal is to build an audience. And so we're publishing a podcast every Tuesday in the efforts of not only putting out great content, but also building an audience. The important thing here is trying to figure out what consistency means to us as a creator, because that's going to look different for every creator. All right, so now we're going to take a look at how can we be consistent with a purpose. I've talked about how being consistent in general does have value, but I'm more interested in being consistent with a purpose. I'm going somewhere with my consistency. It's not just for the sake of posting every Tuesday or Friday. How can we be consistent with a purpose? Number one, we're going to know why we do what we do. Number two, we're going to learn to say no more often. Number three, we're going to make small improvements over time. These three areas are going to help us to be consistent with a purpose. So knowing why you do what you do. So for me, what I am doing is more about the person I am becoming than about the task I'm trying to do. It's not just about why, but who. Making change for me is about becoming the person God created me to be. I've caught a vision for my kazone, dream, or calling, and I'm taking steps to becoming more like that person. I am using my story, my journey with brain health, to create the change I wish to seek. I'm creating a community where it is okay to struggle with brain health and follow Jesus. This is not only why I am doing what I am doing, but it is who I am becoming. All right, second, learning to say no. So, as a recovering people pleaser, as I like to call it, this is incredibly difficult for me. Learning to say no is something that I am just starting to approach. I by no means have this down, but as I am learning and going on this journey, I want to take you along with me. I'm reading this book, and it's called The Practice by Seth Godin. And in The Practice, Seth Godin is talking about being generous as creators. I'm looking at one chapter from that section that talks about generosity. There are several quotes here from Seth's book, and I want to get them right, so bear with me. Seth Godin says that it might be that the most generous thing to do is to disappoint in the short run. Now, he is talking about saying no to people's requests. Seth says that this sort of selective prioritization requires responsibility and vulnerability, and it requires process. So let's talk about saying yes for a second. Seth says, the people-pleasing power of an indiscriminate yes is a form of resisting the yes of shipping our real work. So he's talking about the opposite side of saying no, but he's talking about saying yes just without regard to what you're saying no to. So back to talking about saying no. Seth says, and if your no becomes too seductive, you can get comfortable there instead, never actually shipping your work, because shipping your work means that you'll need to re-enter the world with a yes. So he's kind of contrasting and comparing saying yes versus saying no and kind of the pitfalls with each side. Speaking of generosity again, he says generous doesn't always mean saying yes to the urgent or failing to prioritize. Generous means choosing to focus on the change we seek to make. So when we're looking at saying no to things, think of it as our form of being generous. We may have to say no and disappoint people in the short term so that we can be more generous with our work in the long term. Third, we're going to look at making small improvements over time. When we consider making changes to our lives, whether they're personal or professional, spiritual, health-related, whatever they are, we often think that we have to make dramatic changes. And we often think that we have to make them quickly. This is precisely why most of New Year's resolutions fail within a few weeks. What they don't consider is how they can apply and make small changes over time. In this series of videos, you have seen me go from starting day one of speaking on camera in an effort to get better at talking to the camera. On day one, I was horrendous at talking on camera. I said, all the time. I was not looking at the camera. I didn't know how to look at the camera. I don't know how that's a thing. I mean, you just look at the lens, right? But it was more tricky than that. And so day one, I was pretty horrible. As you progress through the different days' videos, you can see me making small improvements over time. And hopefully by now at day 29, if you look back at day 1, you would think that I make quite a bit of improvement. And you may ask, how did I make these improvements? I didn't set out to make big changes on day 1. Day 1 was about committing to this process. I was committing to making changes. I was committing to showing up and doing the work. Day 1, I was not thinking that I was going to change into this great speaker by day 2 or 3. I started making small improvements over time, and in these 29 days, I've made quite a bit of improvement. And so, likewise, you can make small improvements over time in other areas of your life, whether you're trying to start a writing habit, whether you're trying to make videos, maybe you're trying to start painting, you want to get into art. You can make small improvements over time if you just commit to the process. You commit to the process knowing that you're not going to be great at first, that it's going to take time, and that you're going to have to struggle for a while and figure out what improvements you need to make. Know that as you commit to this process and decide to make small improvements over time, these changes will pay off. My hope is that these series of videos, day 1 through now 29, shows just how you can make small improvements over time and make big progress. So let's review. How can we be consistent with a purpose? First, we're going to know why we do what we do. 2, we're going to learn to say no more often. And 3, we're going to make small improvements over time.